Good morning. It's June 12th, and we welcome, as I always say, our own Rabbi Serotta. I don't know why people do that, our own, that it's like, some of the people we own and some of the people we don't. And the secrets of the 67th Psalm. And Rabbi, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to be with you. I'm very happy to be able to share with you this morning, and sorry that we're not able to do it in person. I was tested positive for COVID this week, so I'm quarantining at home, giving me a little extra time to think about Psalm 67, which may or may not be a good thing once we get started. Hopefully, I haven't overthought it, but I'm looking forward to sharing some of the secrets of Psalm 67 with you. And, there's a common kind of, when studying Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, there's a common kind of division between the theoretical and the practical, as it's called. In fact, actually, some of you were at Torah study a few weeks ago when Rabbi Dov Taylor was here, and he made that distinction, the theoretical side of Kabbalah and the practical side of Kabbalah, which means the theoretical side is the philosophical and theological and kind of spiritual growth side of Kabbalah, and the practical, the use of that word is sort of funny here. It's not necessarily the use of a word that you would expect, because what it really means is the magical. The practical side of the Kabbalah is using the Kabbalah to protect and to create things. So and that's Kamen Gershom Sholem, I think, is the one who sort of split Kabbalah into those two sides, if you like. But I'd like to suggest that those distinctions are not quite so clear. And one of the places where they overlap is what we're going to talk about today, the practical and theoretical sides of Jewish mysticism in Psalm 67. So, and as I'm starting, I want to give special thanks to a friend and a colleague, Rabbi Yoel Kahn, who retired recently and has spent free time finding some esoteric texts and sharing them online, and so in preparation for an article that he's planning. So we've had a chance to have some give and take about some of this stuff, and some of the texts that I'll be sharing today I wouldn't even have known about if not for Rabbi Kahn. So so let me share my screen. So
perfect.
Good, excellent. Thanks for the feedback, Vanessa. It's always good to know that it's working. Let me try and go to screen. I'm gonna have to shrink everybody on the side here so that I can see. There we go. So Psalm 67 is associated with the Omer, right? That 49-day period between Passover and Shavuot that we just finished, right? So last week was Shavuot. So so Psalm 67 is read every day during that time. So so just a couple of words about Omer to help get us started. So Omer is a measure, a sheaf, right? A sheath of wheat or barley or whatever. So we're required to bring an Omer, and we see that in the book of Leviticus. And then in the Talmud, we see that bring to me the Omer offering so that the grain in your fields shall be blessed. So you have a kind of a protective idea, right? That by counting the Omer, bringing the Omer, the field itself is blessed, right? The grain that comes from it. So it is a kind of a talisman in a sense, right? If you bring a sheath to the Kohen, to the priest, then your field is going to do well, right? And this is in distinction to what it says in the book of Genesis. This is from when Adam and Eve have to leave the Garden of Eden. One of the things that God says is, the ground will be cursed. you will derive food with anguish every day, right? That it's not going to be easy to not like it was in the Garden of Eden, right? So so there's this understanding that we need to do this, right? We need to count the Omer, bring the Omer offering, all these things, so that the sort of magically, right, if you like. So here's sort of the magical part of this, that by doing this, then the ground will open up for us, right? It will do what needs to be done. So it's so there's the Omer has its roots in this kind of magical thing that we need to do, right? So and then we're told that we have to count 7 weeks, right? 7 weeks of the Omer, and in the command to count the Omer in the book of Leviticus, it has this phrase: "You shall count 7 complete weeks." The word there in Hebrew is tamimim, which can also be translated as pure, but I think here it has to have the connotation of 7 full days of 7, right? So interestingly, this can be compared to in Psalm 19, the Torah of God is tamimim, right? The Torah of God is complete. So the idea is that when we the Zohar tells us that the 7 weeks of the Omer are the central focus of the entire year, and whoever does the tikkun, does the act of repair on those days, will not be in need of judgment during the Yamim Noraim, right? So that if you do properly the 7 weeks of Serotta Omer, then you don't need Yom Kippur to atone for you, right? You've already done it. You've done all the work that needs to be done. So the idea of these 7 complete weeks is right, that you have completed an act of growth during this time, that you have grown from the experience of the 7 weeks. And because of that, your crops are blessed, and you are better, more whole, than you were when you started. So so that's how it compares to the Torah of God is tamimim, right? That's the possibility that that these 7 weeks can bring to us. So by giving the Omer to God and using the energy that we put into the growth of the crop, as the energy we put into ourselves and our own personal growth, then we cause blessing to come our way, right? So there is something. I would say that this is sort of magical and philosophical, right? At the same time, right? It's the bringing these things will indeed cause our crops to prosper, which is certainly a magical use of the ritual, but it also causes us to grow internally, spiritually, and become better versions of ourselves. And as we do that, that's where the theoretical and theological kind of side of this comes into it. So a couple of words about Psalms in general. I'm just that, I'm sure most of you know there are 150 Psalms in the book of Psalms. Traditionally, we're told they were written by King David. Of course, that's highly unlikely. They are they cover a vast amount of time. But what they are is some of the oldest music, poetry, liturgy in the world. They do have a reputation for being protective in general. I mean, if you were in it's not unusual if you're on a bus in Israel, for example. That's where I used to see it all the time when I lived there. It was on, there would be people on the bus with a little psalter, a little book of Psalms, and they would read it as they went on their daily commute, right? It was, it's a way to pass the time, but it's also, in their mind, it wards off auto accidents and things like that, right? So there's kind of a protective element of looking at the Psalms and contemplating the words for protection, perhaps for distraction as well. As people were coming in today, we're talking about reading the Psalm on your birthday that corresponds to your age, right? So when you turn 68, you look at Psalm 68 and so on. So the idea is to find something in that Psalm each year. And some years, by the way, that can be difficult. Some of them, not all the Psalms are happy Psalms. So they're all songs of praise, but some of them are war songs and plague songs and things like that. So sometimes it's difficult, but it's still interesting to always look at the Psalm for your birth year, right? And of course, we have Psalms that have come from the Bible that are in our regular liturgy all the time. Psalm 92, a song for Shabbat, Tov lehodot l'Adonai. These are Psalms that we sing regularly. Ashrei is a psalm, Psalm 145, that we sing pretty regularly. There's a set of Psalms that make up a section that we call Hallel, that we say on festivals, right? Psalm 150, Hallelujah, right? So there's a number that we know. Kabbalat Shabbat, maybe one more that I'll mention, Psalms 95 through 99, and then Psalm 29, 6 Psalms before Lecha Dodi, one for each of the regular days of the week, perhaps, which gives us an opportunity to contemplate each day of the week as we come to another Shabbat. The Kabbalat Shabbat comes to us directly from the mystics of Sfat, who used it as part of their contemplative practice in celebration of Shabbat. So, and we still sing some of those verses, and of course, Lecha Dodi on a pretty regular basis. So, so the Psalms, a variety of Psalms are a part of our regular liturgy. Psalm 67 is called the Menorah Psalm, and that's what we're looking at here, is a graphic rendering of the words of Psalm 67. So it's you can find it in a variety of prayer books this way, not in our Mishkan Tefillah, but in Orthodox prayer books you'll find this, right? And the idea is that this psalm, the Menorah Psalm, is read every day for the 49 days during the time of Omer. So this is a little book from the 18th century. That's the author, Avraham Chai ben Shlomo Yedidia Sinigalia, which I think may mean that he's from Senegal, but not sure about that. It's published in Italy in the 18th century, right? And kavanot l'sfirat ha'omer means sort of that. You may know the word kavanah, which means intention, right? To pray with intention, with intensity, with meaning, right? So the kavanot l'sfirat ha'omer is the intention we bring to the counting of the Omer. And in this book, right, talks about why this psalm, Psalm 67, rather than, there's 150 to choose from. So why is this psalm the one? Okay. So, and this is from that book from 1770. There are 7 verses in the psalm. Know that 6 verses allude to the 6 ends of the earth, which are the east, west, north, south, heaven, and earth. The Holy One created them. God is master and ruler over everything. And if perchance that reminded you of shaking the lulav, that's a good connection to make, right? So 7 verses, okay, 6 directions, right? And then the 7th alludes to the middle branch, which is the body of the menorah. This verse alludes to the Shabbat, which is superior to and holier than 6 days of labor. It is the secret of the tree of life, which is to say it's in the center of the garden. And from this central branch, oil would flow to the flames of the branches of the menorah. And this flame from the central branch would shine and give more light than all the candles of the 6 branches of the menorah. So, so you start to see that there's an association here with the verses of the psalm, that there are 7 of them. Of course, there are 7 days of each of these complete weeks that we have to count. So you start to see that there's a connection, not just to the words of the psalm, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but to the form of the psalm itself, right? And so the menorah, right, which was created for the ancient tabernacle and then for the temple in Jerusalem, had 7 branches. So the 7 verses automatically get you thinking about the 7 branches of the menorah, right? So, and here's another rendering of the psalm. You can see it on the left-hand page of this. This is from a 15th century Siddur. And I believe I've got some of the translation. Well, here's the actual translation of the psalm itself, right? So you can see the 7 verses, right? So this slightly longer one will be the center, right? And then the 3 branches on one side and the 3 branches on the other. And looking at the words for a minute, you can see that it asks God to bless us. And then near the end, right, may the earth yield its produce. So you can see that there is, in the words themselves, it makes sense that this would be a psalm that we connect to a harvest season, right? Because we're asking God to bless us and to make our crops productive. I'll come back to that, I think. But let's talk about the menorah itself for a minute. So a couple of pictures of the 7-branched menorah, right? And in the book of Numbers, it tells us this is how the menorah was made: hammered work of gold, hammered from base to pedal, according to the pattern that the Eternal had shown Moses. So was the menorah made. So the one interesting thing about the commands about the menorah, of all the things that are made for the temple, for the tabernacle, this is the only one that shows up in passive voice. I'm not sure that we can make too much out of that, except the midrash and commentaries suggest that because it wasn't automatically apparent how to make one of these, right? So so in the Talmud, it says, Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Yehuda, says, an ark of fire and a table of fire and a menorah of fire descended from the heavens, and Moses saw their format and fashioned the vessels for the tabernacle in their likeness. As it is stated after the command to make these items, see that you make them after their pattern, which is being shown to you on the mountain, right? So, with the enclosure of the tabernacle itself, it tells us how many cubits it was, and all sorts of things about how it all goes together. But with the menorah itself, it needed a blueprint, a pattern, right? And a pattern of fire comes from the sky and is shown to Moses. But even that's not really enough, right? So the school of Rabbi Yossi taught 3 matters were difficult for Moses to understand precisely, and to the Holy One showed them to him with God's finger. And these are the form of the menorah, the size of the new moon, and the impure creeping animals. The menorah was shown to him as is written, this is the work of the menorah. So we don't really have to talk about the new moon and the creeping animals, but it's what locusts are kosher. Moses wasn't sure about that. When to proclaim the new moon was a little unclear. But importantly, for our point of view, what the menorah actually looked like couldn't be described, had to be shown. Right? And even then, right? And this I like this one a lot. Rabbi Levi says, a pure menorah came down from heaven. How is this? For the Holy One said to Moses, you will make a menorah of pure gold. Moses said to God, how shall we make it? God said to him, of beaten work shall the menorah be made. By the way, and there's that passive voice that I was talking about. Nevertheless, Moses still found difficulty with it. And when he came down, he forgot its construction. God made its form out of fire and showed him its construction. Still, Moses found it difficult. So the Holy One said to him, go to Betzalel. You remember Betzalel is kind of the artist and architect who Moses turns to build the tabernacle. And the Holy One said to Moses, go tell Betzalel and he will make it. Moses went down and told Betzalel, who immediately did it. Moses began to wonder, saying, to me it was shown many times by the Holy One, yet I found it hard to make. And you, who did not see it, constructed it with your own intelligence. Betzalel, perhaps you were standing in the shadow of God, which in Hebrew is Betzal El, right? So a play on words, when the Holy One showed it to me, right? So there is this holiness to this shape itself, right? That's very important. I mean, it becomes the real symbol of the Jewish people. One of those menorot that I showed you in the slides, you may have noticed, is the one that stands outside the Knesset in the land of Israel. So it's the place, it's the holy symbol of the state of Israel, even now. So the menorah, much older than the Star of David, we'll talk about that in a minute. Then the menorah is much older than that as a symbol of the Jewish people. We find it even in graffiti about Jews, in ancient Roman cities. So here's a little bit more of that text we're looking at with the from the 15th century, and here's a translation of that. So this is a Romani Siddur prayer book. So and by the way, 15th century, we don't have a lot of prayer books older than this. There's a couple of older things that tell us about the order of the liturgy and things like that, but we don't really have a lot of examples of ancient prayer books. I mean, prayer was essentially led by a shaliach tzibor, a representative of the community, and people either knew it and by heart and sang along, as we often do today too, right? Or they simply said amen, when the shaliach tzibor, when the leader of the community finished. But so the idea that everybody had a prayer book in their hands, that doesn't really exist until the printing press. And so prior to that, everything being handwritten, including this text that we're looking at, right, we just don't have as many examples of prayer books as one might expect, but that's because not everybody held one in their hands, right? So there'd be one in the community for the leader. Right? So, but here's some of the translation of that 15th century prayer book. Right? It's a true tradition in our hands that whoever reads this psalm with kavanah once daily during the days of the counting of the Omer is assured that they will not be harmed through the entire year by the nations of the world and will be protected from them. The reason is that there are 49 days of counting. This psalm has 49 words. You shall further find that the psalm has 7 verses, hinting at the 7 branches of the menorah. And the middle verse, whose first words are Yismachu v'yiranenu, is the body of the menorah, It has 49 letters, which corresponds to the days of the counting. Know that this psalm was borne by King David on his shield, inscribed in a plate of gold in the form of a menorah when he would go out to war. He would concentrate on its secret and defeat his enemies. So again, you see some of the magical aspects of reciting Psalm 67, that it will protect you when you use it this way, right? And by saying it every day during Omer, you are creating this protection for yourself, right? Now, the key is you have to do it with kavanah, right? So you have to do it, with real intention and meaning, right? So I guess you could argue that if something happens to somebody who said it, well, their intention wasn't really strong enough, So there's always a way out there, but this idea that it has this protective quality, right? We saw before in the previous commentary that about the 7 verses of this, but now you hear that there are 49 words in right. Did I read that here? Yeah, the psalm has 49 words in it, right? And that the middle verse has 49 letters in it, right? So you see now not just the psalm's connection to the menorah with its 7 verses, but its connection to the 49 days of Omer. And so why this psalm rather than another, right? So it's, I can't say for sure that this is the only psalm that has only 49 words, but it's certainly not, you won't find that regularly, right? So it's not a form or anything like that. It just happens to be that this one has 49. So let's see, this is from a really one of the oldest texts like this that we have. Whoops, let's go back. There are places where it's customary to recite Psalm 67 during the days of Omer, since it has 49 words corresponding to the 49 days of Omer. Further, it has 7 verses, which correspond to the 7 weeks. The one who recites it daily is considered as if he was lighting the pure menorah in the temple, and is like welcoming the face of the Shekhinah, the presence of God. Since you find it in 7 verses matching the 7 branches of the menorah, also the knobs and flowers and the flames which are in the 7 branches of the menorah add up to 49. How is that? 22 goblets, 9 flowers, 11 knobs, and 7 flames. The total equals 49. So it turns out that the menorah itself has a connection, as it's described in the Torah, with the various intricate parts of the menorah that God tells Moses to create, and that Bezalel apparently creates, actually has a connection to the number 49. So, and we have this from Spain in the 14th century. I mean, Spain in the 14th century is really the hotbed of Kabbalah, right? I mean, it's when it's after the expulsion from Spain in the 15th century that Kabbalah really moves its center to Sfat in Israel. But in the 14th century, it's right there in, the Zohar is being created here at this time, the great book of Jewish mysticism. So this connection between the Psalm, the Menorah, and the 49 days of Omer is becoming more clear. So try not to get too deep into the weeds here, but you probably know that in Kabbalah, I mean, we talk about 10 mystical emanations of the endless God, right? The Ein Sof, the God that is infinite. But it's impossible for human beings to really connect to that infinite God And so God, through the process of creating the world, creates a separate sefirot, 10 emanations of God. And of those 10 emanations, 7 of them are active in the physical world, right? The top 3 in the drawing of the 10 sefirot are much closer to the divine realm, to the infinite realm, so that they're not here in the physical world, right? But there are 7 sefirot that are, and it's maybe a talk for another day, but just to understand. So again, 7 verses, 7 branches, 7 sefirot. Okay, each day of the Omer is a meditative and morally restorative exercise, purging the self and preparing to stand again at Sinai. Remember, at the end of the 49 days, we get to Shavuot, and which commemorates receiving the Torah at Sinai. So every year, those 49 days are an exercise in personal growth, a restorative exercise, a growth exercise. And so one of the things that we're told to do is to contemplate on each day of the Omer one of these sefirot in relation to another of the sefirot. So on the first day of counting, we are thinking about the chesed of chesed. What is the deepest meaning of love, right? And then what is, on the second day, we think about love and judgment. How does judgment and love go together? And on day 3, you would do tiferet and chesed, right? And then I gave you the example down below, so you start the next week, you would think about the chesed of gevurah, and then the gevurah of gevurah, and then the tiferet of gevurah, and then the netzach of gevurah, and so on, right? So that there are actually 49 combinations, in a sense, that you are thinking of. And so, each day focus on this. And so there are actually, we have some little prayer books that are for just the Omer, and they'll have one word of the psalm and one letter of the middle verse of the psalm, right? And those represent the word represents the one of the sefirot, and the letter represents the sefirah of that one that we're working on, right? So, so kind of a fascinating exercise, right? And a way of, so this is, now here we're not talking about magic, we're talking about personal growth, right? Excuse me. And so that we have the 2 sides to this everywhere we look, right? That there's the protective element of the psalm, that it's the magical side, and then there's this how do we grow as a human being by meditating on the sefirot and the words of the psalm and all of these things coming together. So Rabbi Eliezer of Worms, and just so you know who he is, so he was the last major medieval German mystic. That's a movement called the Hasidei Ashkenaz. So 13th century, so before the move really to Spain takes place. This is from a printed edition that doesn't come out till 1710. So there's a lot of questions about whether this book really is by Eliezer of Worms, but it's attributed to him. So in this psalm, you will find 7 matters, and there are our 7 sefirot. For all these matters are in Israel's future, and thus each person who reads them with kavanah and everyone who recites it will go toward peace and success. So, so is this magic, or is this spiritual growth? I'm tempted to say it's both, right? I mean, there's this kind of protective quality of taking of saying the psalm, but there's also this inner peace that comes from it, right? This strength, perhaps, the ability to become who we're meant to be, right? So, getting in, I think I've made a pretty clear connection for why this psalm for the Omer, but there's more, right? And yet there's more, right? The center verse, okay. The center verse, the center branch of the menorah, the first letter of that verse is a yud, and the last letter of that verse is a hey. And yud and hey spells Yah. Yah is one of the holy names of God, one of those 7 names that if you put it on a piece of paper, you're supposed to bury it in a geniza or something like that, right? Has to be disposed of properly, okay? This is, but besides being a holy name for God, there's this verse in Isaiah, which we see actually, this is continuing the translation from that 15th century Roman Rite Siddur. I showed you a page of it a couple of minutes ago. So know that the middle verse has a yud at its top and a hey at the end. The yud alludes to the world to come, and the hey to this world, which was created with a hey, as it is written, for in Yah Adonai, you have an everlasting rock. So I put there, that's the typical translation of this verse from Isaiah, but frankly, it doesn't make any sense, with the first half of that sentence. Yeah, you have to take another step and understand that in the Talmud, Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Eli interprets this verse differently, right? So the word sor, which is translated here as rock, an everlasting rock, sor olamim, he reads as a verb rather than a noun. So rather than sor, which means rock, he reads it from the verb yatsar, meaning to create. And olam, which does mean everlasting, but also means the world, right? So olamim, so he reads with Yah, God creates worlds, right? So from Yatsar Olamim. So with a Yud and Hey, Adonai created worlds. So hold on to that idea for a minute, because the first and the last verses of the Psalm have 7 words each, which correspond to the 7 Sefirot we're talking about. I also saw it in the commentary that refers to the 7 planets. That you shouldn't take planet literally there, because first of all, they didn't know all the planets that we know. And they don't include Earth in this list of 7 planets. And they do include the moon and the sun. So, but anyway, more importantly, probably the 7 Sefirot for us. The middle 4 verses have 6 words each. So that gives us 2 pairs of 12. So perhaps 1 pair representing the 12 tribes of Israel, 1 representing the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 months of the year, right? So, and then we talked about the beginning and ending letter of the middle verse, but the final letters of the first 3 verses are, I can't actually see there we go. Hey, Kaf, and Mem. Every letter is a number, so you can count up words. So Hey, Kaf, and Mem together equals 65, which is equal to the name Adonai, right? And the last letters of the final 3 verses are Mem, Tzadi, and Vav, and that equals the value of the word kol, which means voice. So remember the Yud Hey from the middle one, and we get Kol Ya Adonai, the voice of God. So that phrase, Kol Ya Adonai, is a reminder of the voice that the Israelites heard while standing at Mount Sinai, right? So again, one more reason this is the psalm that we read for 49 days in preparation of standing again at Sinai, right? Every year at Shavuot, it's as if we were the Israelites standing at Sinai, hearing the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 Commandments, from the Kol Ya Adonai, from the voice of God. Right? So, it's hard to think that all of these things are simply coincidence and that they're just the wordplay of the rabbis. It would appear that the author of this psalm had all of these things in mind when putting it. Well, I was going to say putting it down on paper, but that's not exactly how that worked back in those days. But in composing this poem, right? So it's wordplay is very much an important part of the Psalms. I mean, we have in alphabetical acrostics. Psalm 145 Ashrei is an alphabetical acrostic. Psalm 119 is an alphabetical acrostic times 6. Every stanza is 6 verses beginning with the same letter, 6 verses beginning with Aleph, then 6 verses beginning with Bet, 6 verses beginning with Gimel, right? So the idea that there's an intricacy here, there's no intricacy that's beyond the author of the psalm, right? But there's and yet there's more. So there are 216 letters in the psalm. And that phrase, Kol Ya Adonai, is equal to 216. So you can trust me, I actually counted the letters. And in Kabbalah, there is a 216 letter name of God. Okay? This is made up of a code. There are 3 verses in the book of Exodus, right at the splitting of the sea, at that remarkable miracle. Those 3 verses, each one of those verses has 72 letters, right? These are the verses. And the way it's actually usually called the 72 letter name of God, but the truth is that it's a 216 letter name of God. It's 72 groups of letters. And there's kind of a code to it, which you take the first letter from the verse 19, right? The last letter from the verse 20, and the first letter of the verse 21. And then the next 3 would be the second letter of the verse 19, the second to the last letter of verse 20, and the second letter of verse 21, right? And you do this 72 times, and you get a 216 letter name for God, which, we have lots of holy names for God. I mean, we're most familiar with Yod He Vav He, this 4-letter name of God, which has immense power. But there are many other names of God that also have power according to the Kabbalah. And so this 216 letter combination is there in, you can find it on amulets and in all sorts of magical implements, to help people. Excuse me. So, so I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other for a moment. And so you can see that there are, these mystical and magical connections, right, to this psalm. This idea that if you just say it for the 49 days, you say it with intention, that it brings this protection upon you. But I hope you're also seeing that there's a kind of a, guide to intentionality here, right? The ability to become blessed and what that means, right, is powerfully within this as well, so that it's not just the magic of it. I mean, right? And talk about the psalm asks God to bless us, and what does that really mean? I mean, when we bless something, we take it and we make it special, right? When we bless the challah, we take an ordinary thing, and by doing a special blessing, a mitzvah, saying motzi or kiddush or something like that, we make something special because it becomes now part of something sacred, right? So the item isn't better, right? We did, we didn't turn it into, holy water, exactly, right? We didn't. This is not transubstantiation. Right? We just turned something. We gave something purpose, right? So when we ask God to bless us, what we're really asking is we're asking God to give us purpose. So to allow us to be part of something sacred, to see our purpose, right? So when we contemplate Psalm 67, we are contemplating our purpose in the world. And the middle verse talks about how all the peoples will praise God, the nations will exult. So there's an idea here that if God blesses us, then our purpose is to reflect God's love, not only for us, but for all the peoples of the world. So the psalm is about why we go through these 49 days, a process of development and preparation for receiving the Torah, taken seriously each year. This is a time of personal improvement, not for our own enrichment, not for our own protection, but so we can be of better use to others, making the world a better place. So as I said, I think this psalm kind of rides that line between the practical Kabbalah, the magical Kabbalah, and the theoretical, the theological, the philosophical, the spiritual growth that the psalm can bring. So those are my secrets of Psalm 67. I do have, let me see if I can share this easily. I just wanted to share, maybe, let me see if this is right. Yes. So I think, let me know if you can hear when I play this, but I just thought, very nice Sephardic melody of Psalm 67, takes about 2 minutes. And I love the graphic that they created for it. So
Rabbi, you have to, oh, we can hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
למנצח בנגינות מזמור שיר, אלוהים יחוננו ויברכנו, יאר פניו איתנו סלע לדעת, בארץ דרכך בכל גויים, ישועתך יודוך, נמים אלוהים, יודוך, נמים כולם, ישמחו וירננו, לאומים, כי תשפוט נביאים מישור, ולאומים בארץ תנחם סלע יודוך, נמים אלוהים, יודוך, נמים כולם, ארץ נתנה יבולה, יברכנו אלוהים אלוהינו, יברכנו אלוהים, ויראו אותו
So there's Psalm 67. Got a few minutes for thoughts or questions.
I can turn
Except I have to turn that
into a
off.
beach bum.
Are you all hearing that too, or is that just me?
I bring families
You have to turn off your, there you go.
Yeah.
I make
Well,
memories
Did I get it?
for people
Not
I
yet.
don't know yet.
Oh no. Go away.
I know this view is too good not to be shared. I am a verbal host.
Why can't I make that go away, Vanessa?
You have to find where it's playing from,
Yeah.
like YouTube, or it might have
Well,
got
it
a
is
whole.
YouTube.
So go back to that page.
Okay,
Have
there we
some
go.
olive oil
I got
before you
it.
bed, and your sleeping partner will love
It's
you.
still
for
there.
I know. I'm getting rid of it. Got it.
Okay.
Something about
We do
olive
it.
oil, I think. At the end.
Yeah, we do have a question. Evie, go ahead.
Mine wasn't a question, it was a comment. I just thank you for sharing the explanation of the menorah. And I'm embarrassed to say that when I was a little girl, my parents were gifted with a menorah like that. And I was always embarrassed and hid it away because I thought that either it was a mistake or it was very Christian, and I didn't want my Jewish friends to think that we had something that was Christian in the house. So I kept hiding it, and I think finally it was a really heavy piece, and I think we finally gave it away as a donation. I just went to check and I no longer have it, but
Yeah.
I never knew anything about, the 7 candelabra. So thank you for sharing that, but it's just kind of a almost painful reflection now.
Well, I'm sorry for the pain there, but yeah, the 7-branched menorah was created for the tabernacle and then the temple. According to tradition, it was taken away when Rome sacked Jerusalem, right? So no one has seen it since then, but it's in the what is that arch outside of the Colosseum in Rome? There's
Arch of Titus.
Yeah. There's the depiction of the Roman legions carrying away the menorah. Okay, so it's so the word in Hebrew is menorah, right? It's usually translated into our English translation as lampstand, which is a much less familiar word to most of us than menorah. So there's the picture of it in the so that's from Roman tradition, right? Not so that's an important text, if you like, because it shows Rome sacking Jerusalem. It's not our story about it. So
Any other questions? Marilyn and then Rick.
Oh, Rabbi, that was so wonderful. It was so rich and so meaningful. You should publish it.
I think that's what my friend Yal Khan will do. He's really doing the deep research on this.
Oh, it's wonderful. It was just a wonderful presentation. I have heard of Psalm 67 referred to as the Song of Thanksgiving because of the harvest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I've seen that as well, and it's not exactly a Thanksgiving psalm when you read it. It's more it's a more of a hope for hope to have something to give thanks for psalm.
Right.
Right. So it's more of please God, help make this crop good so that we can give thanks afterwards, right? But still, I think that's that phrase has been attached to it.
And then I had another question about how frequently the word God is mentioned in the psalm. Is there a number? I didn't count it.
I didn't count it either, actually, amazingly, since I counted so much else about it. But the other thing, but it is interesting, right? I mean, it's if part of the whole thing has, all these numbers have to line up, right? So that we get 216 letters. So if you leave out one mention of God, you don't, the logic of the whole thing sort of falls apart. not only that, that twice within the body of it, it uses the word Selah, which is parallel to Amen. Right? Once in a while we have Amen Selah in the Psalms. But so again, it looks to me quite deliberately that the author says, I need a certain amount of letters. This is how I'm going to get there, right? And so if you dropped out one of those selahs, then all the numerology stops working. And so it's it's very meticulous and deliberate in that sense. So every mention of the name of God is, if not deliberate for needing to put God's name there, it's needed to make it 216 letters.
Thank you. That Sela was my next question. So
Yeah.
thank you. You're way many steps ahead of me.
Well, Sela is, it's I don't know that it has a meaning. I mean, it's like Amen,
Like a pause or a break.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you this, it's a popular new Hebrew name for kids.
Really?
Uh-huh. I know a bunch of sellas. Rick.
Going back to the beginning of your presentation, it intrigued me, pardon the pun, maybe it mystified me, as to how if somebody does 7 complete weeks, it obviates the need to go through Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
And what about this whole concept then of prayer and commitment in a community setting if the 7 weeks is done on an individualized basis? And what about the sins you may commit against others between the time of the Omer and Yom Kippur?
Right.
And it goes on and on. What about the intentional acknowledgement of shortcomings, which is, to me, part of the basis of Yom Kippur? How does that get addressed through this?
Well, I guess there's probably a certain amount of hyperbole in it, right? And I don't think, I certainly didn't mean to suggest, and I don't think that our ancestors did either, that you wouldn't go to shul. You wouldn't go to synagogue on Yom Kippur because you did 7 weeks of Omer. But what they're saying is you would have done so much good for your own soul. You would have grown so much as a human through the deep contemplation of these 7 weeks that you will have nothing to atone for by the time Yom Kippur arrives. So that's exaggeration, right? We all know that, even if you take 2 steps forward, you can still take 1 back. As soon as we finish Yom Kippur, we start in on doing the wrong things again, and getting ready for the next one, right? So, but there's just this sort of the idea is that how powerful these 7 weeks are, right? And I think maybe, unfortunately, it probably does display the fact that they're relatively unknown in Jewish tradition. It's not just to us as Reform Jews, right? I mean, even people who count the Omer every day always are not necessarily thinking any deeper than, it's time to count the Omer, right? So the idea of turning it into a true spiritual practice that lasts for 7 weeks would have lasting effects, right? And I think that's really what they're trying to say. So with a little bit of hyperbole that, you will be so good after you've done 7 weeks that you won't even think about sinning between then and Yom Kippur. And so you're going to be fine. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Andy.
Okay. This was really enriching. First of all, what constitutes a psalm? So you referred to the Psalms being what David wrote, even though that wasn't really possible. But I have these books that someone named Debbie Perlman wrote, Flames to Heaven, and she calls them Psalms, and they sound like it, but I mean, I don't know anything about the numbers or anything, but are they Psalms?
Well, to be a psalm, it really has to be one of the 150 psalms in the book of Psalms, right? Those are the only actual psalms in the world. But modern poets can call what they write a psalm, I can write a poem and call it a psalm, many poets have, I think, and I'm kind of familiar with the book you're talking. I don't have books of them. I have one, I think. But you're talking about things of them as being modern psalms.
I can tell you that her numbering has no relationship to the numbering of the book of Psalms, if that's what you were asking. She's writing her own.
I was quite sure
she's
of
writing
that.
modern psalms, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
She has them numbered, but they're not related to the
Right,
numbers of the
right.
book of Psalms.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of knew that. Okay, so the other thing is that I wish that we had more. Last year I took a class and I did the Omer, and I was something I knew really nothing about before that. And it was, made me very mindful. And this year I just went by and all I knew about was the cereal. And so I think it's worth us, paying more attention to as Reformed Jews. And lastly, I really appreciated learning what a blessing was, how to be blessed and how to bless something.
Yeah.
Because I really never knew that. And I think it's quite relevant.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll be honest, it's hard to sustain the level of attention that it takes, to do the Omer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I just, if it was easy, we'd all do it, right? So it's definitely worth it, and not easy to do. But we'll keep plugging away, and try to make more of it, So, but that it's, it's a real deep, sustained thing to do 49 days of Omer. So,
Thank you.
I think that, when we started the serial at Legacy Lakeside, both Rabbi and I thought about it together of like, how can we just bring this to the forefront? And, certainly for our students at Lev Learning, it's one level, but so glad to have now this extra level for our adults. Judith.
I'm sorry if this was already mentioned. I had to drop for a second and I'm back. I was here for the lecture and it was wonderful. I appreciated it so much. I would love for you to share your slide deck if you're willing.
sure.
There was so much rich material in there that I would like to go back and revisit. And then also, I'm so glad you offered this. And there's a part of me that wishes you offered it at the beginning of the Omer counting period. And I'm wondering if that should be something that we would schedule for next year. Going along with Andy's comment about, trying to help each of us be more mindful of this time and perhaps, engage in a practice beyond cereal boxes. Not that, I love the cereal boxes. Nothing wrong with those. Those are great.
Right.
There's
Listen, Judith,
more.
the only thing I can say in our defense, you have to remember that the beginning of the Omer is Pesach.
I have not forgotten that.
There's probably, 4 or 5 bar mitzvahs. There's just
I have
every
not
day is like
forgotten that
crazy.
for a moment. I have
And now
not
it's
forgotten.
June. It's like, I got a hot minute to talk about this.
Right. So the thing is that you have this beautiful presentation that is now developed. And I know I could benefit from a second reading of it. And I'm just thinking, that because you have it already prepared, maybe it's now available to use next year at the beginning of the Omer period. And yes, I understand when it starts, and that's part of the beauty of it and part of the challenge of it, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
And I just thought this was great, and I would like to have it again, and I would like to have it in time to remind me to really pay attention to it at the time where all the spiritual energy is available, that you're supposed to be paying attention to it.
Well, at every bar bat mitzvah that I was at, Rabbi would say not every, but where they did a great job, Rabbi would say, listen, I'm going to come, you can read for us Torah anytime. And I would say, but I'll be the one who comes to find you to read Torah. So Judith, I'll be the one to remind Rabbi that we need to do this next year before we start counting the Omer.
That would be lovely. Thank you.
Sounds like a plan.
And Rob Lindner asks, is there a tradition of when we use the symbol of the menorah versus Magen David, the Star of David, or the Shield of David?
Oh yeah, I didn't get a chance to get into that. Did you notice that one of the commentaries that we looked at said that King David had this psalm on his shield in the form of a menorah in gold? And I think when we call the six-pointed star the Magen David, right, the Star of David, and I think most of us think that that's what King David had on his shield, but not according to this commentary, right? So the truth is that the Star of David doesn't really become associated with Judaism. I did research on this a long time ago. I'm not sure I'm going to remember exactly, but I think not until the 3rd century of the Common Era. So the menorah is a much older symbol of the Jewish people than the Star of David. So and the Star of David doesn't have any real meaning in Judaism. I mean, the six-pointed star appears in a lot of different form, a lot of different communities and traditions over the centuries. It's only relatively recently that it's become a symbol of the Jewish community. So whenever the Jewish community wanted to symbolize itself up to a certain period, it was always the menorah, right? And only in more recent years, and more from outside than inside, the stars that people had to wear during the time of the Holocaust, right? But the stars were used by others to mark the Jewish ghettos and things in Italy and places like that. So that was not necessarily a symbol that we chose on our own. Actually, the six-pointed star. The menorah, however, is from beginning to end a Jewish symbol.
And Evie asks, what is a pollster? I think in Christian tradition.
A pollster.
Palster. Full transparency.
Altar.
I Googled it. It says a pilgrim's staff.
I think
Okay.
he means a psalter. You used a word for
No,
the,
Psalter, maybe?
No,
Is
no,
that-
some kind of a book of Psalms.
Right.
Psalter,
A psalter.
one word.
Right.
Oh,
A psalter is the word. Psalter.
Where did I put
Um,
it?
oh, that
which
makes
is
more. That makes more sense.
Oh,
a
this one,
collection of-
sure.
a collection of psalms. So,
and is it a Christian thing? It's not. It's just a collection of the Book of Psalms, right?
yeah, I
We call it Tehillim.
right. That's right. So
Okay.
so it's the English translation of Tehillim in a way. Right? So
Thanks,
it's
Vanessa.
so I would definitely say it's not Christian. It's just English. It's kind of like what happens when they translate menorah as lampstand. Is it made more sense without translation.
But are they our Psalms? I mean,
Yeah.
Or-
Okay. So the Psalms in the Christian Bible and the Psalms in the Hebrew Bible are the same.
thank you. It's a better way of phrasing it. Okay.
Right.
Marilyn.
Translations can differ. I mean, translations, are always commentary, right? So we definitely get some differences in translation. We also understand that our psalms are liturgical. I mean, I talked about how they appear in our prayer book and all those things, but they are not. There are no mitzvot that comes from the Psalms, right? Commandments all come from the Torah. So the Psalms are lovely, but they're not. We don't read them as commandment, right? Evangelical Christians, particularly. I mean, this is a topic for another day, but one of the things they point to when they talk about being anti-choice is things that are said in the Psalms. And from a Jewish point of view, the fact that a psalm may say that life begins at conception doesn't mean that that's what Judaism thinks.
Before I call on Marilyn, because we can keep talking for a little bit, I just wanted, I know some people have to go. Tomorrow night is the Green Group meeting at 6:30. Thank you, Sharon. Friday night is Tikkun Olam Shabbat, and it's gun violence prevention, again, with our own Karen Fliegler. And Tuesday is with Rabbi Ari Mafik, a queer look at being made in God's image, a session on spilling over. And always watch your Macomb at home for the links, or you can contact me. Okay, Marilyn.
Yes, I wanted to say that the psalm is so beautiful in the way that it expresses. It reminds me back of the prayer that was said with Abraham, when Abraham was promised all the land and the nations, will be a light unto the nations. So there's a parallel I hear in this psalm with Abraham, which is so meaningful. And I think that it's such a special psalm because it brings godliness into the world through the Israelites. God blesses the Israelites, and then we're to bless the nations, as it says in the link back to Abraham, to bring righteousness and truth and shine light into the world, the whole nation. And so we are we've been chosen not because we're special. Well, we are, but that wasn't the reason. When we said we will do, and then we will hear, other nations didn't want to accept it. So it's our responsibility, and this psalm carries it out.
Amen.
Amen, Selah. And on that, I will say the kid I know named that, her mom is a rabbi. So it's great seeing everyone. I hope I see you this week. If you need any links, just let me know. Really, Yasher Koach, Rabbi, great. And I'll have the recording of this up by tomorrow. All things being equal.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm sorry we couldn't do it in person. So.
Yeah.
Rabbi, thank you very much for doing this when you're a
health.
little under the weather. That was
Thank
extra.
you.
Feel better.
Oh, pretty good. Thank you. This is the best day so far. So.
All right, good.
Feel better, heal.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you
all. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.